Good morning. My name is Jeff Minier. I'm with Shiloh Baptist Church of Bowie, Maryland. And today we want to continue to look at 2 Corinthians chapter 12. We've been chasing the idea of God's love for us in times of trial, especially with the pandemic. If God really loved me, then and we're looking through the Bible for how God answers that. And what we're looking at right now is if God loved me, he'd give me perspective. He'd help me understand how to process life. And we're seeing that starting with 2 Corinthians chapter 12, 7 through 10, as the Apostle Paul wrestled. The Bible seems to give us heroes, great men and women of the faith, but he lets those heroes show us their weakness so that we understand that God uses people with weakness and that there's hope for each of us. If the great spiritual people struggle and I struggle the same way, then maybe God could use me too. 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. The Apostle Paul says, "To keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations, there is given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" A number of years back now, somewhere in the Northwest, a young pastor stood and looked at what a car accident had done to his wife. In a short while, the doctors told him there were no brain waves, and so they advised him to discontinue life support. He did. A friend wrote the lyrics to this song to try to minister God's love and grace in that time of pain. And someone else put it to beautiful music. "I don't understand why some people must suffer, or why children and young people die. I don't understand why some people have plenty, while others just barely get by. Why do new waves of trouble keep pounding against me before yesterday's waves ebb away? It's in moments like these, when my faith starts to falter, God's Spirit will tenderly whisper and say, 'There's a reason, there's a plan, there's a purpose, and there's a goal. And Jesus, who loves you more than anyone can, he is still very much in control.'" As we talked in our last time of sharing devotions together here in this text, you see Paul's thorn in the flesh. He doesn't bother to describe in detail what that is, but it is a problem that is so affecting his life, and he feels so limiting his ability to serve God, that he's begging God, "Get rid of this." And God says, "Your focus is wrong. Your focus is on this weight, this thorn in your flesh, this irritant, as though it is stopping you." God says, "I want to hand you a brand new perspective. My grace is sufficient for you. My unmerited enabling favor is what you really need, not your idea of freedom. My grace is sufficient for you, the basis. My power, that enablement to accomplish that you so long for, is brought out to its completeness in the middle of your inability, in your weakness, the very things we as human beings do not want, do not like. That is exactly where God says, now I can get something done. Paul processes all of this. I was taught that everything starts with what you and I accept as true. John 8:32, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. Everything starts with what is true. And when you accept something as true, it then changes your values. Your values then change your attitudes, which change your emotions, which then affect your behavior. So if your behavior is consistently wrong, you've got to walk it all the way back to what you and I have accepted as true. Paul initially had accepted as true that having no thorns in the flesh, having the freedom to move and to serve God in his understanding was the best way to serve God. God says, no. It's in the midst of your weakness, in the midst of your inability, when you need to completely, totally depend on me, that I can then work through you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. So Paul takes that and thinks through all of his response based on a new truth. Because what I want is Christ's power to rest on me. What I want is people to see the greatness of Jesus Christ and all he's done for us. That's what I want. That's what is good. That is what is valuable. So if what I want and what is valuable comes out best in my weakness, well, my attitude changes, my emotions change, my behavior changes. So let's look at what the Apostle Paul says here as he reprocesses and lets this new truth shape all the way through what we believe is true, changes our values, which changes our attitudes, which changes our emotions, which then changes behavior. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. You hear the completely new value set and new attitudes. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight. I have new values, new attitudes, new emotions. I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties, because I can now rest content. I understand more of how God wants to work. He is giving me brand new perspective in this, that when I'm weak and great things happen, who gets the credit? God does. Who did I want people to delight in and see how great he was anyway? God. So you mean I win by being weak, so that Christ's power may rest on me. And what happens? Everyone will see, well, that was God. If my being weak means that God wins, bring it on, the Apostle Paul said. So his brand new focus stated, I delight and take pleasure. His focus explained, when I am weak, I'm going to get excited about it. Does he figure trouble will pass away? Not at all. It's when I am weak, not if. Does he expect blessings? Absolutely. Then I am strong. If you would grab a piece of paper and a pencil, I'd like to leave you with the word focus as a way for you and I to continually have a simple tool ready to process what I'm going through right now and bring God's perspective into this. As we spell the word focus, F, you and I need to face ourselves honestly, to really get a handle on what's going on emotionally down on the inside. It is easy to ask God to change people so I could be more spiritual, but it's not the other people. It is my reactions to the other people. It is my reactions to the circumstances. It is I who have to change. I might like them to change, but I need to change. Face yourself. Your and my spiritual future hinges on being honest with ourselves today. When you and I are running into an irritation and a frustration, we need to take it to God in prayer and try to discern what God's purpose in the difficulty might be here. Last time we met together, I mentioned that the Bible talks at least about 3 purposes God will want to work on when he allows difficulty and suffering in our lives. One of them is what the Bible would simply call a sickness unto death. God is closing my time at a certain job. I see it coming and I'm concerned. Sometimes God says, I want to get you a new job. I want to remove you from this situation. This is done. There's literally sickness unto death where we will then step out of this life into eternity. So God may be closing things up, and that may be what we see coming, and we don't have to fight it. We just work with God. This time of my life, this piece of my life is closing up, and I will cling to God in the closing. Sometimes God will allow difficulty in our lives because of disobedience to God, and he needs to chasten us, wake us up, and turn us from going our direction, following him again. And then, as we see in John chapter 9, Jesus and his disciples are walking down the road and they see a blind man, and the disciples say, Lord, why is this man blind? Did he sin or did his parents sin? And Jesus said, this man is not blind because of a fault. This situation is not a chastisement on his sin or his parents' sin. This situation is for the glory of God. Someone once put it in a poetic way that I find beautiful, and many, many different, I don't say the word poster, but that's not quite right. Meme isn't quite right either, but people have put this saying on many beautiful pictures you can find on the internet. Sometimes God calms the storm. Sometimes God calms his child and lets the storm rage. So when there's a difficult situation that God is going to use for his glory, sometimes God does it in this fantastic way. Like at least 2 situations I have heard direct testimony of. Someone had cancer somewhere in their brain. They are going in for surgery this day. They have had multiple scans to see the cancer. And this day they go in for one last scan to know just what they're going to do in surgery, and the cancer's gone. God answered prayer and totally removed the cancer. They had very clear records. They had scan after scan, it was there, and God dramatically removes it. For other people, God gives them the grace to be calm and glorify God in their weakness, and God touches many other lives in the hospital, in the nursing and doctor staff, in their neighbors, and in their family. As God pours out his grace and his power is made complete without removing the problem. So as we look through the word focus, face yourself. Open your heart and seek God. Lord, what are you wishing to do? Are you closing out a piece of my life or my human life in total? Lord, is there some place in my life where I'm just ignoring you and being bullheaded and I've got to turn around and change? Chastisement. Or Lord, is this a difficulty that will bring you glory? And I may not know how, and you may never reveal to me how, but I know I need to seek you in it. Open your heart. Now, that's F and O, open your heart. C, if there's sin, confess it. If this is chastisement because we're being bullheaded, turn and follow God. Are you and I willing to put brand new value on the irritations as a means for God to grow us into the image of Jesus Christ? Are you and I willing to place our hope in God's ultimate purposes in the midst of my suffering? Our human heart will constantly slide back to what I feel is my ultimate good is for me to be comfortable and happy. What God's ultimate good is for me to be holy and usable so that people see the Lord Jesus Christ and his joy in the middle of my difficulty. Someone once taught us to use our names and the meaning of our names to derive a spiritual goal for your life. So, my first name, Jeffrey. It means divinely peaceful. My second name, my middle name, Dale. It means a valley. It wasn't hard to see that a major goal for God's will in my life was to learn how to be divinely peaceful in the valleys of life. And that has been my whole adult life. What is God's ultimate purpose in this irritation, this struggle, this heartache, this loss, this pressure that just won't seem to let up? And lastly, as we think through, face yourself, open your heart to God, confess sin if it's there, trust God for his ultimate purposes, and then S. Will I say with Paul, I want Christ's power to rest on me. Therefore, will you and I say, I delight in weaknesses, in insults and hardships and persecutions and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Please allow God's word to comfort and minister grace to your hearts. And if there is some other way we could be of counsel or encouragement to you, please feel free to send us a Facebook message, Shiloh Baptist of Bowie Facebook page, an email, which you can find from our shilohofbowie.com website. May God's grace be upon you. Thank you for joining me today.